Guys. Things are really heating up today. Last night, the FBI issued warnings about possible Iranian drone attacks, but not for the Middle East. These warnings were specifically about targets inside the United States, in California. Because of this, several high-ranking members of the Trump administration were suddenly moved into secure shelters in Washington. And on top of that, reports have surfaced claiming that the United States may be negotiating a complete withdrawal from the Middle East. If that turns out to be true, it would be a massive geopolitical shift. But the most explosive part of this story is still coming, so make sure you stay until the end. Overnight, news about the Iran war exploded, and it looks like we may now be seeing the next stage of escalation. The FBI warnings are particularly serious because they specifically mention possible attacks on US soil, especially in California. But before we get to that, let's quickly look at the latest reports about American evacuations from military bases in the Middle East. Several media outlets reported last night that the United States may be holding talks with Iran about evacuating American bases and potentially withdrawing troops from the region. If confirmed, this would completely change the strategic situation in the Middle East. According to these reports, the idea being discussed is that the United States would evacuate its bases and Iran would agree to a ceasefire. Negotiations would then determine whether the evacuation would be temporary or permanent. Of course, President Trump would never openly admit such negotiations because it could be interpreted as a defeat. But let's be honest, the situation in this war is extremely complicated. According to the Wall Street Journal, even Trump's own advisors have recently urged him to consider an exit strategy. So it would not be surprising if quiet negotiations were already happening behind closed doors. Iran has also repeatedly said that any ceasefire would require the withdrawal of US forces from the region. And with the Strait of Hormuz disruptions and the growing pressure on Israel, Iran appears to believe it now has leverage in negotiations. So the reports about talks may not be as unrealistic as they sound. But here's where things get even more serious. The FBI issued a security alert warning about possible Iranian retaliation against targets in California. According to Reuters, the alert came from the Los Angeles Joint Regional Intelligence Center and referenced intelligence suggesting that Iran could potentially launch a surprise drone attack from a sea vessel targeting US locations in California if the conflict escalates further. What makes this even more surprising is that the warning was reportedly issued earlier in the conflict, but only became public yesterday evening when the war had already reached its 12th day. And that raises an important question. Why release this warning now? There are several possible explanations. First, intelligence agencies may have received new information suggesting that an attack could be imminent. Second, authorities may have already prevented one or more attacks and expect further attempts. But there is also a third possibility, and it is by far the most controversial. Before we discuss that, there is another development worth mentioning. Several high-ranking members of the Trump administration have reportedly moved into fortified military residences near Washington, D.C. Among those mentioned in reports are officials such as Attorney General Pam Bondi, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Stephen Miller, Kristi Noem, and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. At the same time, a Rapid Response National Guard unit has been activated in Washington, capable of responding to unrest within 24 hours. So suddenly we see multiple developments happening at once. FBI warnings about possible attacks on US soil, government officials moving into secure military housing, and emergency forces being activated in the capital. All of this raises a big question. What exactly is going on behind the scenes? And this brings us to the third and most controversial theory. Some people are asking whether these warnings could be connected to fears of a false flag operation, an attack that could be blamed on Iran in order to justify a larger military escalation. It's important to say clearly that this is only a theory circulating online, but it shows how tense the situation has become. History has shown that wars are often accompanied by controversial claims, intelligence disputes, and political narratives. Because of that, speculation tends to grow whenever major conflicts escalate. Adding to the tension is another development in Washington. During the ongoing Iran conflict, Congress approved changes to the military registration system, expanding automatic registration for US citizens at age 18. Previously, young men had to register themselves. Now the process will be automated through government databases. While officials say the change is administrative, Critics argue the timing is notable, given the escalating global tensions. So let's look at the overall picture. The FBI warns of possible Iranian retaliation inside the United States. Several senior government officials move into secure military housing. Emergency response forces are activated in Washington. And at the same time, reports appear about possible US negotiations to withdraw from the Middle East. The big question now is simple. Will Iran actually attempt to attack the United States? Or are these warnings part of a much larger geopolitical strategy behind the scenes? Write your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel if you want to stay updated. Because one thing is certain, something very big may be unfolding in the background right now.